Melissa, this is great to be on a webinar with you. You're doing some awesome things in your space with regards to coaching and looking specifically at the area of stress. And I'm really pleased to invite people to this webinar that we're doing called Coach Like a Boss.
Totally.
The goal is to provide those essential skills for emerging and evolving managers. To be a successful manager of the future requires you to embrace the role of a coach. That means a lot of things to different people. You say you're a coach and people kind of roll their eyes, or they think they know what it means before they actually even talk to you. In this webinar, I'm glad that we can sort of unpack some of this and really give some key skills that people can take away. But before then, my name is Steve Wright, SA Wright Coaching. Thanks for joining us. And Melissa, you were just say.
My name's Melissa Griffiths with Ascension, and I'm also super excited about this. I feel like there's some great synergies with what we do, and it really is cutting edge in being able to bring something new to these emerging managers.
Definitely watch the space for both of us with regards to this kind of format. I think this works well. I'm excited just to have a sort of a heart-to-heart chat with Melissa today, and then it's going to be great. So I want Melissa to, if you're okay, just kicking us off with regards to what you see is needed the most right now in this coaching space.
Well, yeah, I mean, the angle I bring is very much from a stress perspective, and I'm sure you've probably read, seen, heard the same statistics I have about mental health in the workplace. I think the Occupational Health and Safety Group have said that it's the number one issue in the workplace is stress and all the symptoms that go along with that. And I think something like 97% of all doctor visits are related to stress. So it's not something that can be looked at lightly, right? But look, certainly as we're looking at the emerging manager and people who are maybe new into that position, it's not just a question of bringing leadership skills. There's a lot that goes to that. It's being able to recognize what's happening with your team. I guess as we're looking at the emerging manager and what they need to consider, tell us about coaching and like why is it even important to be a coach in this environment?
Coaching is one of those areas whereby it allows us to really come alongside somebody, to not just lead in terms of my position is above you or hierarchically you report to me, but more like we said in our tagline, guiding. There has to be an element of I've got your 360. I get a sense of what's going on around you and not just in front of you.
How do you differentiate between being that coach and kind of being a friend? Because as a manager, there is a separation in some way since you are responsible for their workload. So how do you differentiate between being a coach and like just being a friend?
And that may just tie into some of your stress and well-being work, because that in itself can be a very difficult line for some people to negotiate. They feel that their role requires them to not be as connected or as empathetic with their reports, because they feel that as maybe as a sign of weakness or something that will get in the way of getting an objective done.
Right.
And I think a lot of that ties into empathy. There has to be an element of understanding where the boundaries are. You need healthy boundaries.
Well, and that's what the research shows as well, is that sometimes when people are stressed at work, it's because there aren't clear job expectations and it's not being clear what they want. And so it can lead to confusion, which strangely enough leads to a stressful environment. I mean, you see the same with kids and with pets. If they don't know what the boundaries are, there's a push. And I think once you move into that role of becoming a manager, having maybe been a peer, there is a big step that goes along with that, because suddenly the dynamic changes. That can lead to big stress response from both the manager and the team member, who are now finding themselves in kind of different positions, if you like.
How big of a challenge do you see that in the workplace?
It's huge. Seeing how people can affect that, how it affects them when they get into that new position. And I think being a manager, being able to recognize that is key. And while it's not our responsibility to manage stress for our team, we do have a duty of care as managers to make sure that they have the best possible environment,
Yeah.
and that we do what we can to minimize stress interactions. Of course, it may not be coming directly from work. There could be external factors that the manager doesn't know anything about, but as best that we can create that environment, so at least at work there's clear expectations and boundaries. And I think also speaking about it in the workplace is really important, like speaking about mental health and also maybe being a little bit vulnerable oneself, so there's not that stigma around it. A lot of times people feel nervous to do that, and certainly as managers don't want to show any kind of sign of quote weakness, and yet having an open conversation about how people are doing and what the workload looks like and what the deadline is can be really impactful to the team itself. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because as you say that, it makes me think of, you know, on this call, you're a female in industry, working in the workplace. I'm a black man working in the workplace. There's sometimes the discussions around race, for example, they may still be stigma, and people are hesitant about approaching certain things.
Discrimination is a very stressful workplace event, and sometimes
Yes.
people don't even know it's going on. And so I love that you've brought that up, and certainly anybody who is in a minority position would be experiencing some stress depending on the environment. So much comes from the top as well. Like if depending on what the organization looks like, what the promotional opportunities are, how involved people are in decision making. Again, that's at an organizational level that can make a massive impact to the people, to all the employees. One question I had for you when we're looking at the stress of managing a team is coaching obviously takes away, if you like, from the day job. It's like I'm doing my day job and now I have to coach a team. How do you differentiate that? How does it take it away? What do you recommend to your clients for that?
The element of coaching needs to be it needs to be changed from an either or to a component of a managerial skill. There should be as little friction as possible when interacting with your team.
Right. So what kind of
From
things can
like you
people
said,
do
from a
to,
stress, from a
to ensure that there's as little friction as possible? Any pro tips?
I think the key things are the cadence of how often you meet, the environment. We talked about the importance of boundaries, and then setting those clear objectives that make it easier for people to understand how to win. You know, it's no point playing a sport if you don't know how to score a point
Right.
and win the game. So those things are important, and there's tools out there that will help with that. We use an app that allows for that environment to be cultivated in such a way that it reduces the friction. You meet, you record, you capture what happened in that one-on-one. It happens within the app, which is very nice. The thing is, you don't have your methodology or your modality of teaching and coaching is up to the manager, and that's something that we can assist with in terms of how you coach. But the environment in which you coach is also managed as well, so that there's less friction about it. You don't have a ton of notes after the meeting to kind of collate and think about. You actually give advocacy or give engagement to the person that you're reporting, that reports to you, so that they go away and work on objectives, and they can feed back to you in a much more one-to-one type environment.
Right.
And I think those things kind of help demystify the coaching in terms of thinking that it has to be something either or. It allows you to bring it into your everyday interaction. Your reports can feed back to you. If they've got something that came up and it's a challenge, they can report through the app that says, hey, I said I was going to get this done by Friday. It's looking like next Wednesday because this came up. If it's a critical path, manager can speak to that and work with them.
Right.
If it's not critical path, they can maybe look at the Slack and then deal with that in terms of how they work it. And me just describing that makes it less stressful for me as a manager because I've got the feedback, right?
I
They've
was
told
just
me,
about to
and it makes
say,
it less stressful for the report.
well,
It makes it less stressful for the report too because they've told me ahead of time rather than me waiting till Monday. Where's the
right.
report or where's the outcome? And they go, oh,
Well,
so
you know, and all of those things you said do help to create less stress. I mean, the better you know your people, that's when you can also start to recognize signs that something may be not quite right. You know, missed
yes,
deadlines is usually a sign that something's off. And it could be that they're overworked. It could be that it was set incorrectly in the first place. They might have other factors going on. But unless you know that, then you can kind of just assume that they're not doing a good job, right? So I think it's really important to know your people. And it sounds like that app is a good way of being able to track like what's really going on with the employee and their workload. So things like missed deadlines, not
yeah,
participating in teams, and obviously through COVID, it's been harder to do some of that, but hopefully we're on the other side of that now. And as people get more back into teams and involved in teams, if someone feels different or is a little bit off, understanding we can have bad days, but if you notice trends and you notice that people's personality does seem to be a little bit different, that's usually a sign it's worth having a conversation. What's going on? And the more that you are open to having those conversations, sometimes people just want to be heard and just want to be able to share. And you may also be, as the manager, you may also be the only person that they feel comfortable sharing some of that with. So I think being able to wear that hat is equally important. And it sounds like your app is a great way to track that. So I love that. I want to learn more about it.
it isn't a matter of coaching or not coaching either or because I've got a day job. Empathetic is different from sympathetic.
Right.
And sometimes people feel they want to have a friend at work where they can just, you know, offload. And while that can be cathartic, it's helpful. You want to have again the boundaries that set that in a workplace context,
Totally.
so that the person who is going through something can be helped, can be supported in a way that is a way that is is conducive to the workplace that they're
Yeah, and
in.
again, that goes
You know,
back to the culture of the organization itself. Like, is it coming from the top?
yes,
Are there
yeah,
programs in place to help people, and are people aware
yeah.
of what they are? And is there a destigmatization around it where they're comfortable even using those programs in the first place? Or maybe even like a wellness day, which sounds so flippant and yet can make such a big difference to the people within the organization, knowing that from a company level there's an understanding and awareness, which really again changes the culture and makes it a place people want to stay.
And that's a lot of your work in terms of understanding or unpacking the elements of stress.
Well, when there's a
You know,
stressful incident or response that something changes, you can tell it's either a physical symptom, which would be something like headaches, migraines, hyperventilation at an extreme level, anxiety, panic attacks, even gastrointestinal issues can be signs of stress. And then, of course, that can affect teams. So it can come out in behavioral issues, like I said, missed deadlines, just things that on their own don't seem to be a big deal, but when you look at the bigger picture, it could be a sign of stress. And again, it doesn't necessarily need to come specifically from work, it can be external factors, but when it all builds up, then the employee's resilience at some point just says, I need a break, I need to take it. And that's when I can come in and really look at what's happening, what can people do, how can it be addressed, because there are certain things that can be done at an organizational as well as a individual and a team level.
and as you say that, there's an interesting dynamic because sometimes it's helpful to have the coaching be external because maybe either something which is maybe a little bit more closer to a personal issue or there may be a trust issue that needs to be addressed, and having an external coach is of value. I mean, you see that as
Absolutely. I
well.
mean, that's the role of a coach is being able to see the blind spots that for whatever reason we miss once we're in that role. And then also just having experience of multiple similar situations, you can really bring a great perspective that you've seen work. So I'm sure you see that too.
there's a healthy perspective, the 360 view, and sometimes it's like our kids, right? So we tell them something and they don't do it, and then someone else tells them something and they do it, and we go, "Well, I've been telling you that all the time." So,
My parents always
so
used to tell
it's
me,
not.
no man is a prophet in his own country, right? And it's so true that
That's true.
you're ignored at
That
home.
very, very true. Absolutely. So there's no and I guess the thing is, there's no shame or stigma with regards to seeking outside coaching help. An elite athlete has no problem with coaching because they understand the value that it brings to their performance.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, look, we're all doing so many different things all the time. We can't be experts in everything, and that's the role the coach can play. If you're feeling a little bit dodgy, a little bit off, it's a really great opportunity to bring somebody in.
And dodgy for our American friends means it's not quite wholesome or sound. It's a
Absolutely.
very British term, not the South London term. But I think the coaching culture is a little bit more acceptable, or the perception of coaching is a little bit more acceptable in the US. Certainly, California is one of those states that always want to be on their early adopters for things, and get the perception fairly quickly. The UK may be a little bit more that a bit more reserved in that respect. But understanding that there's great value in this. On my LinkedIn, I did a walkthrough with one of the founders of Master Coach X, which is the app, and it was very insightful because it was a matter of how I felt being coached and how comfortable I would be coaching somebody else. And it was, again, very low friction because it wasn't difficult to do.
Right. One of the tools I use is like a sensor that's done through the Heart Math Institute, where I'm a certified practitioner, and you can actually measure heart rate variability, which is a great way to see how stressed somebody is. And I think bringing technology into the role of the manager makes it so much easier because it just makes things more fluent and fluid. And yet, technology in itself can be stressful, especially if you don't understand it. Um, but being able to look at your heart rate and say, okay, yes, I'm actually in a coherent state, or I'm in an incoherent state, and thus at higher risk of some kind of stress response, is key. And you can even see in a meeting, if something doesn't go very well, you can actually see how your heart rate changes. So I think being able to be aware of it, and then obviously having the tools and techniques to address it real time, is key, which is obviously something I do. But I think being able to really see it makes a massive difference. And it sounds like you're bringing the same technology concepts to managers.
Yeah, as you mentioned, I mean, I remember you telling me a story of someone having an episode at work, at their job, which is it's sad. It's sad to have a health crisis at your work, and the irony is that your work probably caused the medical emergency.
We haven't seen the
And then
lawsuits yet, but you never know, right?
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, especially when it becomes chronic, if you're in a high stress. And also we have this thing about having stress and busyness being the badge of honor,
Yeah.
which I think is it's so wrong. And as you mentioned, something like a wearable or some technology that gives you that feedback that tells you that if you think that it's right to be stressed, and the heart monitor, the variable heart rate tells you that actually you're in a place where it's not good for
Right.
you, you can at least then get the feedback and say, if my boss thinks I should be this busy, but my heart says,
Right. It's funny,
then
when I first moved to the States about 25 years ago, one of the things that I couldn't get my head around was the 10-day vacation. Because, of course, coming from England, coming from Europe, 6 weeks in the summer. And yet it's definitely got better over the years, but it's still not great. We're no Europe,
right,
right? Where we close down
yes, Yeah.
seemingly for a month. But there is that thing of like, I must work hard in order to be effective, which is extremely stressful, and especially for people, maybe young families or people who are looking after aging parents or any responsibility, being able to then juggle that. And the numbers that came out of COVID, of course, were horrendous with how much stress was then placed while everybody's then at home. Um, but yeah, it's real. And balance is key, right? I mean, there's days when we got to put in the hours, and there's days when there is going to be stress, and especially some professions. I work with a lot of lawyers, and there's deadlines and client demands, and that's always going to be there. But I think having the balance and then also having the tools to address it real time when you feel that pressure come on, and you just looking at the workload, and sometimes people even feel paralyzed with how much they have to do. They have so much to do that they can't do anything. And I think being able to have those tools and techniques to know how to move forward is key. And that's something that a manager or a coach can really bring to the team, is helping them move through those episodes, if you like.
Well-being is the cornerstone,
Yeah.
right? If we're, it's no point, it's no point amassing all these hours, billable hours, and hitting goals and targets if at the end of the day you're a wreck.
Right. I think that could be the subject of webinar number 2.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, how to achieve goals without wrecking yourself.
Right.
You know? But but definitely, I mean, I really appreciate and value what you bring to the table in terms of being acutely aware of what stress does to an individual, a team, or an organization. If it's something that's endemic, or you don't have a plan, even, you know, in terms of understanding what you can do to address, recognize, and alleviate, you know, stress. I love the idea for Wellness Day, and you know, we have this. Sometimes people think, they roll their eyes and think, oh, okay, it's just another. It's a jolly. You know,
Right.
someone can go off
Which
and
for
do
our
something.
American friends means fun.
And in actual fact, sometimes a wellness day can be, it should have good stress tied into it. It's something that you lean into. A lot of times stress can can make us lean back, lean away from something, because we just feel overwhelmed, or feel that we're inadequate, or we feel that we're ill-equipped. Whereas sometimes we want to lean into a situation that really will allow us to grow, build the resilience that you mentioned, and exercise that muscle. So I really appreciate what you're bringing to the table
Thank
with
you.
regards to understanding that stress area.
Yeah. And you
And
too. I mean,
my
I think this is so needed, being able to help people, to coach people. Sounds like this app is really integral. I certainly want to learn more about that, but I think it's key, right? Being thrown into a role without the support of self as well as team can be stressful. So yeah,
We've seen it get easier and easier to depend on technology or the tool, and that we can take a back step
right.
to it. And I think it's important with anything that that you implement from a technology standpoint, is that you ensure that you're getting the benefit from it, and you don't let the tool do something that you should be doing. And I think something like the framework of the app, for example, is such that it's lightweight by design, because you still have to bring your coaching self to it. You still have to bring your empathetic self to it. You still have to engage with your team. The real goal is just to kind of reduce some of that overhead or friction with regards to just managing that process.
Right.
And if it's fun, then you'll do more of it. And if it's fun, then you know the coach and the coachee enjoy the interaction, and that can only lead to better things. The more you measure in a healthy way, the better the outcome. There we have it. I think we've gone around and explored a lot of the aspects with regards to elements that are required and really needed in that space of helping the emerging, evolving manager to cope with their coaching journey, their interaction with their teams, and be equipped with some tools. Just to kind of, as we sort of wrap up here, can you sum up some highlights, takeaways that you'd like people to have, Melissa?
Oh goodness. I would say that there is a duty of care to be aware of what's happening with your team. So open, honest communication. We say it a lot, and yet it seems hard to do. Setting boundaries, expectations, so people are comfortable and know what to expect. Removing any stigma that might exist, that well does exist. Yeah, using technology, use what's available. There's so many great apps out there. I love the one, I use the HeartMath one, but there's many, and they all have a really profound impact when you can actually see real data. So I would just, my goal is to make becoming a manager, be able to talk about mental health issues as much as we talk about, say, leadership skills, because to me it's just as important what's going on internally with the person, which will then affect their output and make a stronger, better team. So I would start there.
For me, the big takeaway is I echo everything you just said there in terms of understanding your peers, whether they are reports to you or whether you report to them. Mm-hmm. Like I said, once you've removed some of that stigma and you've leaned into some of that vulnerability, is to have an environment whereby you make it part of who you are as a manager. And some of that is the techniques and the skills in terms of interacting, building empathy, building rapport, working with and through your team. And then some of that can be leveraged with technology that allows for a coaching environment, a one-on-one meeting environment, to be productive, to have a regular cadence that gives you feedback in a timely, effective way. Those are the two things really, just to create the less stress, less friction through a methodology and an app, if you like, or a platform that allows you to do it. And then lean into some of the skills that you just mentioned with regards from an organizational standpoint, as well as the manager has to be a boss, yeah, and really take that on board for themselves to model the best behavior for the best behavior, yeah, for the organization. And that's great.
All right.
But that's been fantastic. Melissa, it's great. It's great for us to connect in this way. I am looking forward to the next one. I'm sure we're going to have some feedback and comments. For those that are watching, thank you for your time and attention. You can reach out to either of us through our various connections and networks. And we'd love your comments and feedback in terms of just what we've covered. If there's anything else that you'd like us to maybe address in an upcoming webinar, and we'll be thinking of stuff that we would love to share through this audience as well.
Sounds great.